Hi, my name is Isabel. Welcome to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to sew these pants.
And let me show you here two other versions of these pants. The first version here is with welt pocket on the front. These are all fake pockets, by the way. And here is another version with slash pockets, and I also narrowed the legs for a tighter look. I made the pants using linen without any elastan, but I do recommend always a bit of elastan in your pants. It makes them more comfortable. So I made another version in a sort of grey synthetic fibers with a bit of elastan. And then I also made the green version in drill, a twill fabric that looks a bit like denim. You got some choice, but I do recommend a fabric with a nice drape, some elastan in it, and opaque. Let me show you the pieces of the pattern. Here are the front legs, the back legs, the pockets, the pocket lining, the back pocket lining, the back pocket strips for the welt, the fly guard, the waistband, and the belt loops. Special attention to the back legs on which I've drawn the darts and the welt pocket placement on the wrong side of the fabric. By the way, it's better to draw the pocket placement on the right side. I'm gonna take my front legs first. I'm pointing at the fly extension. Right now they're the same on both legs, but I'm gonna cut it off my right leg and I'm gonna cut off like 5 millimeters. So be careful not to mix up which leg you're cutting. Again, we want the right side to be without the extension. Next, I'll stick some interfacing along the edges where I'm gonna sew my fly in a bit. I'll finish the edges with my overlocker. Once this is done, I'll move on to the front pockets. I've got my right front leg before me, and pause. It is a good idea to add a strip of interfacing here where the pocket lining will be sewed. If you don't do this, there is the risk that the fabric stretches a bit and then it'll look a bit like this, a bit wavy, a bit gapey. I'm gonna flip it so the right side of the fabric is visible. I take my front pocket lining on which I've added a bit of interfacing, not compulsory. I lay it on the leg, right sides touching. I've pinned my layers and also traced my seam line with a pencil. And I'm not going to sew all along the edge, but rather I'll stop like 2-3 centimeters from the end, because then I'm going to add the other part of the pocket and I want to be able to sew them together and finish the edges. I've sewed the lining, and as you can see, I stopped before the end. I flip the lining like so. I press down, making sure the lining fabric isn't visible from this vantage point, and I top stitch. There you go. Now I take the other part of the pocket, I lay it and I pin it to the lining only. I've put many pins to prevent my lining fabric from sliding, and I sew respecting 1 centimeter of seam allowance. Like everywhere pretty much, I finish the edges. And now I'll sew the pockets on the side in the seam allowance like this. I've also sewed just this bit here in the seam allowance just to secure the area a bit more. I'll make the other leg on my own and I'll see you for the fly. Here is my fly guard, which I've pressed down wrong sides together. I'll sew the open sides of it and finish the edges, and this is what you should get. Now I take my zipper. It was originally longer, but I cut it and blocked the end with a few stitches. I place my zipper on the fly guard like so, and at the top part I'm gonna respect 1 centimeter of seam allowance. I've already made a mark on the zipper 1 centimeter after the last tooth. I line up this mark with the edge of the fabric. I pin the zipper to the fly guard and I sew. You don't want to sew too close to the teeth, as you want to leave some space for the zipper head to be able to go through. It's not an invisible zipper here, right? These are notes to myself because I went a bit too close. And this is what you get. Now, left front leg. I've pressed down the zipper extension. I flip my leg to show the right side of the fabric, and the fly guard should be coming like this. So I pin the parts together and try to leave a bit of space, maybe 1-2 millimeters again, so that the zipper head, is able to go through and slide down smoothly. And I'll sew in the crease here. This is what I get. Now I'll press down and don't burn or melt the zipper and top stitch. There you go. Now I take the right front leg. I'll add the fly. I forgot to tell you that you had to finish the edge here with your overlocker, the curved edge. I lay it there and I sew respecting 1 centimeter of seam allowance. I flip the fly and I press down. I top stitch. And it looks like this. I now lay the right and the left front on one another right side stitching to sew the crotch. So I pin first. Now I'm going to be sewing from here up to where the teeth begin. Basically it's here, if I'm not mistaken. Basically here, right? So I'm going to sew all the way 1 centimeter from this edge here down. Okay, so I have sewed this seam here, both sides. If I open, this is what I have. Alright. You guys, I had forgotten to overlock this piece here, the fly, so I did it now and it didn't turn out too bad. I could do it pretty cleanly by going on top of this seam allowance. So I have pinned my 2 legs carefully on top of one another, so that it doesn't move, you know. And then I'm gonna take care of this part here. I'm gonna be sewing here. So I have pinned. If I put it like this, maybe we see better. I've pinned, and I'm gonna sew here. Okay, so this seam is done. And on the other side here. And now if I open the pants, this is what we have. Maybe see this. I think I'm gonna insist here a bit with my sewing machine to make sure it doesn't open, doesn't rip later on. I'm gonna be sewing this external seam here, visible. As you can see, I've already done it once. I've removed it. It's a fail. So I'm going to try another method. You start here, you sew all the way here. Once you're here, you stop. Back stitches. You flip it, and then you probably will have to be on this side. And you're going to have a seam probably stopping here, and you're going to stick your needle in here, and then you're going to back stitch and come back and back stitch here just to finish. Okay? I'm gonna take this away. This is gonna be coming like this. Now I finish. All right, the front is now done. Zipper, pockets, and we're now going to move on to making the back of the legs. So this is a first back leg, and this is the wrong side of the fabric. I'm going to be making the darts first, and as you can see, I already have drawn the markings for the welt pockets, which actually it's not necessary to draw them on the wrong side of the fabric. More interesting to draw them on the right side. I'm just gonna sew my dart now. I have sewed the dart and retraced my welt pocket so that it's a bit more straight. And I have stuck some interfacing in the back. Now I'm going to place my lining here in the middle, and I'm gonna sew it here. Pause. Hi, this is the voiceover. I realized later that for this seam here, you should leave some space on the sides. So you should start your seam like 2 centimeters away from the edge of the lining and stop also 2 centimeters away from the opposite edge of the lining. I had to use the seam ripper to free the edges, as you'll see in a bit. I'm gonna sew it here and I'm gonna baste it not too far from where my pocket will be, just with basting stitches so that it stays when I move on to the other steps of the process. I have sewed the lining to the top part of the pants in the seam allowance, hopefully, and then I've basted the 2 layers together. You can do it by hand. I use my machine, but sometimes using your machine is not recommended because it can damage the fabric. So here are the pieces for my welt pocket. One is shorter than the other by 1 centimeter, so that's 4, and that's 3 centimeters. And this one I have pressed down in half, right sides together, and this one I pressed down, but it's not necessary. So I tried to press it back to being flat, but you can still see. So I made a mark in the middle with my pen, and I'm gonna place the little welt pocket part on each side of this line. And now I'm gonna sew along the line. So I'm gonna sew here. I've got to identify where I need to stop. So I need to stop here and here. And I need to sew along this line. This line. I stick the needle. So here we are with my 2 parallel seams. This is the right side of the fabric and the wrong side at this point. It looks like this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my fabric here. The cutting line stops 1 centimeter before the end. So I'm going to make a marking. This is 1 centimeter before. There we go. So I'm going to cut the fabric in a line between these 2 points here. I cut this with my rotary cutter, and then I'm gonna do the more precise cutting till the end with my scissor. So that's what we have, and now I need to cut some lines going from here so to the corners, like that. Do I need to have this cut? Maybe not. Scheiße. Okay, now I made a mistake. Is that a big issue? So what I've done now is I've cut the welt pockets layers as well with my layer here, my layer underneath. It's absolutely not necessary. Don't do that. See, here I didn't cut. Yeah, it's not a big issue. It's not an issue actually right now for me, but yeah, don't do that. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn the stuff inside out, something like this. Now I'm gonna press everything down so it's nice and everything is at its spot. Okay, I have pressed things down, so this is what we have now, and this is what it looks like on the wrong side. This should be really up. The reason why it went down is because I cut, but you don't want to cut. So now what we have to do is, I'm gonna be like this. We want to sew here, right? So that this part is snatched. Again, we want to sew here, this side and on the other side here, just a straight line. I've sewed here on the sides, and I'm just gonna cut the threads. And this is what we have. Now we're here. The pocket's still open, right? We want to close it by sewing these layers here, following this seam. So we want to sew on this seam all the way. Now the pocket is closed. I'm gonna remove my basting threads. And now the step will be to close this like that. But for this purpose, right, I need to cut this because that's way too long. So let me just identify where it is. Where is my limit? My limit is apparently here. And on the other side, apparently here. And I'm going to cut like okay, now I can come like that. Pin the layers together. Actually, you know, this is not correct. I should have left some space here. Okay, and on the other side, same thing. We pin the layers together. And now I'm going to sew 1 centimeter from the edge on each side. And I'm also going to come with my overlocker. And I'm going to finish both edges here. And finally, I'll also sew here in the seam allowance. Here is the pocket on the outside, and here it is on the inside. If you lift, of course you can see the interfacing, but other than that, pretty clean. And also I have tucked in, you know, the excess thread of the overlocker back in there using this one needle which has a round tip. Can we see? Yeah. I'm now going to sew the two back legs together. I'm going to lay the legs right sides together, then I'm going to sew here. This is the seam that I just made, followed by the overlocker stitch. When I open the pins, this is now what we have. I am now going to lay the front and the back legs on top of one another, right sides together. And I will pin and sew the sides and the inner legs and the other side. Here we go. So I have sewed the back and the front together, and then I've finished the edges with my overlocker. So I am now going to make the belt loops. I have this strip of fabric for you, which I have divided in 5 parts. Every 8.3 centimeters I've made a mark, and now I am going to finish one edge of it. I've made some lines 2 centimeters from the edge, and I'm going to fold this like that and this on top like this, and then I'm going to press down. And now I'm just going to go and sew in the middle using a straight stitch. And I'm going to do some back and forth stitching here because this is where I'm going to be cutting my strip. Here we go. So the question now is, where do I pin my strips? So there's one that's going to be coming here in the middle back. Then 2 in the back, 4 centimeters from the sides. And then here in the front, 11 centimeters from the side. I've counted 11 centimeters, I've made a mark, and then I put my strips. And same in the back, 4 centimeters from the edge, my little mark is here, and then I put the strip. And now I'm gonna sew my strips to the pants in the seam allowance. There we go. Now I'm going to attach the waistband here. So this is half of my waistband, which is cut in bias. As you can see, maybe you can see that the grain line here is straight, but then here it's not. First thing I'm doing, I'm connecting the part that is in the bias with the other part that is in the bias, here and here. And that's not in the bias, that's in the bias. Hi, voiceover again, correcting that mess here. I'm kidding. Here on the screen, one can see something that's not entirely correct. Namely, let me show you the paper piece of the waistband. If you look at this, it's written here, left front, and here, right front. That is because the left part of the waistband should be cut in your fabric as such, like the entire piece, while the right part should be shorter, like this. And now if you look at the screen, you'll see that all my parts have the same length. That is because I forgot to cut my right part shorter. So I'm not showing, but when I pinned my waistband, I was like, what the hell? Why is that too long? And it's only then, when I realized that the waistband was too long, that I cut the waistband shorter on the right side only, and it was perfect. Conclusion, either cut the two pieces correctly with the right sides shorter, or do it like me if you know that you'll get mixed up between what's
the right or the wrong side of the fabric again, and then what's the left and the right part, and what's the inside or the outside of the waistband.
Just cut all parts the same way and you'll make the parts shorter on the right when the moment comes. I think. Suggestion. Take it or leave it. Okay, bye. I'm sewing here. I've sewed them. I open the seams and I'm gonna press them down like this. So just to show you, this is the part of the waistband that's gonna be inside, and I've traced a line like 1 centimeter point, like 75 from the edge, because I'm gonna be right now folding this way and pressing down. This have been pressed down, and I am now gonna sew two parts together, right sides together. And where we're gonna sew is angle here, all the way, and here again. Notches all around, and now I'm gonna be pinning the waistband to the pants. I turned the belt inside out and I pressed it flat, and now I'm gonna pin it to the pants. I'm gonna use the notches to make sure I place everything well. The notch is here, and this goes to the side. Alright, so I have pinned my belt everywhere. I'm gonna be careful that these strips are straight down, you know, perpendicular, and they don't go astray. When I sew, I'm gonna sew 1 centimeter from the edge, fold around, coming back here. This have been pinned, and now I'm gonna be sewing just here in the crease so that we don't see the seam. Can you see? The seam is here. It's hidden pretty nicely. and in the inside this is what we have. It's not as pretty, but I don't mind for once since the outside is very clean. And now I'm gonna attach the belt loops. I've pinned my belt loops and I'm gonna sew here close to the edge. And now I'm gonna cut this, so maybe I have 2 or 3 millimeters left, like this. And I'm gonna press down. I've also sewed here the bottom part, so also it secures the pocket a bit, prevents them from gaping each side, on the back as well. And on the inside you've got little marks here on the lining as well, and here in the front, yeah, above the pocket. So it is time to sew my button. I have picked this button, which is a bit of a pink beige color, and I'm going to be sewing it here, so I have to make the buttonhole here. I have traced my buttonhole. I'm making it start 1.5 centimeter from the edge of the fabric here, and then it is 1.7 centimeter wide, so I'm going to make it like 1.7, 1.8. There we go. I actually haven't used the same color for the poppin and for the thread coming up. It's not so great. And here is the button. Not that clean either, but yeah. Now I am going to hem the pants. I have tried the pants on to determine which length was the correct one for my height, and I'm going to make a 4 centimeter long hem. Voila, the hems are done. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned some things. Go check out the other pieces of this spring-summer 2022 collection that I made. Follow me on Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok to be in the know of things that I do when I'm not on YouTube. Meanwhile, take care and I'll see you soon for another video. Bye. Kiss.